Okay, hi everyone. As you all know, I hope you we're running a little bit late, but I hope you had a good experience this morning in distilling. And now, as Howie said, we were kind of moving into a different way of applying distilling, which is in being interviewed, and specifically being interviewed and videoed so you can see yourself. So to kind of introduce this and to help you a little bit, we're going to hear from Judy Muller, who some of you know already from the distilling group. But Judy is a very experienced television and radio reporter. She, for many years, was a correspondent from ABC News, also NBC Morning Edition, has written a
NPR.
NPR, I'm sorry. What did I say?
NBC.
I'm sorry, I meant NPR. Yeah, NPR. And has written a couple of books, including a new book, called
Emus Loose in Egnar, big stories from small towns, about small town newspapers in America.
So Judy's going to give you some advice. As we've said before, you know, our main purpose in doing this interviewing isn't so much to prepare you for television, but to just give you more practice in talking in a different situation. But some of you do go on television or may go on television, and so it can have some practical use that way. After Judy finishes, I'm going to distribute another thing of groups, and we're basically going to split in half. Half of you will go to the writing workshop with Gene Hammond. The other half will go upstairs to those 2 rooms on the 5th floor, some of you were already in, to do the video interviews. And then those 2 groups will swap. So, Judy.
Okay. Oh, that works. I'm glad you had lunch first. I was so worried that you're going to be a hungry crowd hoping I'd wrap this up. Now I can take my time. We've loosened you up without dumbing you down. And we've improvised you and done all sorts of other things, downsized you. And now you're ready for the dreaded television interview. Let me just ask, how many of you have ever gone through a TV interview about your work? Just a show of hands. Okay, while those hands are up, how many of those people thought it was a good experience? Oh, good. I'm glad to see you. Okay, that's all right. Good. That's more than you usually get. Okay. Most people hate this because, and scientists and broadcast journalists especially, I love the fact that we're in the Nano Institute, because my field of journalism is the nanojournalism. It is, you know, tight, concise. You've been distilling your message. I do that on a regular basis because I have to tell a story in 2 minutes or less, usually, unless I'm doing Nightline, and that was longer. But even so, we're talking about taking a complicated story and really getting it down into the tightest language we can. A lot of scientists will complain. You've worked for years on one thing, for instance, or your research has taken you weeks, months, years, and we airdrop in and we ask you to sum that up in 15 seconds or less. Usually less, because 15 seconds is a long soundbite in today's news. I'm not kidding. And why is that light in my face? Okay. So obviously, it's going to take the 2 of us working together in this situation to make the story work. I've got to distill a story down to 2 minutes, and if you know how to distill your message so that when I walk in the door, you know how to give that to me in as tight of language as you can and give me the gist of it as quickly as you can, we're all going to be better off. And if we all have the same goal, which is to communicate that science to the public, and help make for a more well-informed public, then we're on the same page. So I want you to go over your fear and hatred and loathing of TV journalists and just suspend that for today so that you'll get a lot out of it if you learn how to do this. I think it's important to realize that it takes real skill to get something down. I think you probably found that in your workshops that you just came through. I think it was Hemingway who wrote the shortest story ever written, a 6-word story. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. Try to do better in 6 words. There it is, it's a story. 6 words. So you can do a lot with a little, if you know how to do it. I was going to play a piece that I had done on interviewing scientists, but last night I was watching the CBS Evening News, and they did a piece about the Hubble telescope, and the reporter is a friend of mine, Bill Whitaker, who did a lovely job. And I decided to show this to you. It's about 2.5 minutes to start this off. And I want you to watch the scientist. He's an astrophysicist, also an astronaut. So he's like one-stop shopping. And he's the guy who worked on the Hubble. I mean, you know, you can't get any better than this. It's a beautiful piece. There's 2 scientists interviewed in it. And just watch what they do. And you've just been talking about your message. Watch how they handle these questions and what's done with it. And how long those bites are. They're short, okay? So can you do that for me?
Yeah, so I make sure it downloaded completely.
Can't hear it. Sound is...
Yeah.
From tomorrow, the space shuttle era officially comes to an end when Atlantis returns home.
We'll get it.
I still have that one.
And while we're pulling this out, let me just say that, you know, some of you are probably thinking, no, I'm never going to go on television. It'll never happen to me. If you are interviewed at all in this digital age, you will be on a camera, okay? We're all going to the internet. So there's going to be video and audio. And audio is a separate issue. We're going to talk about that too, your voice. Radio, television, print, we're getting rid of those titles now. This is all, it's audio, video, and text. That's how we're teaching it at USC. That's what we're calling it. So someday you will have, if you do an interview, it'll be on video, it'll be on audio. So don't, you know, try to suspend your feelings and judgments about television. Okay.
1 week from tomorrow, the space shuttle era officially comes to an end when Atlantis returns home. The shuttle never left the Earth's orbit, but the shuttle program helped scientists gaze far into the universe by launching the Hubble Space Telescope. Bill Whitaker tells us that over 2 decades, Hubble has taken more than 500,000 pictures.
At just under 8 feet in diameter, Hubble isn't the biggest telescope in the world, yet it's a giant, revealing splendors of the cosmos with a depth and clarity never seen by human eyes. Peering deep into space above the glare of Earth's atmosphere, it has traced the dimmest sources of celestial light, the early sparks of creation.
I believe that the Hubble Space Telescope is the most significant scientific instrument ever created by humans.
John Grunsfeld is deputy director of the Space Telescope Science Institute and a former astronaut who flew the shuttle 5 times, 3 of them to service Hubble.
Hubble has been able to look back in time, it's a time machine, and observe those very first galaxies, sort of toddler galaxies actually, as they were 13.2 billion years ago in a universe that's 13.7 billion years old.
And liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery with the Hubble Space Telescope.
The first images were blurry. Astronauts had to install corrective lenses. Astronauts would visit Hubble 4 more times, and each time improving it.
It could be on their site.
3 of them to service Hubble.
Hubble has been able to look back in time, it's a time machine, and observe those very first galaxies, sort of toddler galaxies actually, as they were 13.2 billion.
Right here. It's right there. Boy, it sure didn't want to cooperate.
Yet it's a giant,
Okay.
revealing splendors of the cosmos with a depth and clarity never seen by human eyes. Peering deep into space above the glare of Earth's atmosphere, it has traced the dimmest sources of celestial light, the early sparks of creation.
I believe that the Hubble Space Telescope is the most significant scientific instrument ever created by humans.
John Grunsfeld is deputy director of the Space Telescope Science Institute and a former astronaut who flew the shuttle 5 times, 3 of them to service Hubble.
Hubble has been able to look back in time, it's a time machine, and observe those very first galaxies, sort of toddler galaxies actually, as they were 13.2 billion years ago in a universe that's 13.7 billion years old.
And liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery with the Hubble Space Telescope.
The first images were blurry. Astronauts had to install corrective lenses. Astronauts would visit Hubble 4 more times, and each time improving its vision and scope, unveiling such wondrous sights as gas clouds billions of miles high, where stars are born. Zolt LeVay is the scientist-artist who created these awesome images, translating Hubble's black and white digital codes into the colors they represent, literally painting by the numbers.
One of the most important reasons we make these images is to show people what Hubble is doing and show people what the universe looks like, what magnificent things are out there in the universe.
Hubble proved black holes exist, that distant planets have atmosphere, that the universe is expanding at an accelerating rate.
The end of the shuttle program means no more repair missions to the Hubble. Still, scientists say it could continue to provide an incredible array of images and information for perhaps another decade.
At Hubble's final tune-up in 2009, Grunsfeld was the last human to touch the telescope he calls old friend.
We did it.
What Hubble did is nothing less than change our view of the universe and our place in it. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Baltimore.
Okay. Just get rid of that. So, yeah, let me get some feedback from you on what you noticed about this, now that you've been working on messages and being interviewed and that sort of thing. Anybody notice anything about what he did well? Yes.
Well, I don't know. The thing that really struck me was how he, offensively, actually, was that he said it was the greatest scientific instrument ever created.
Yeah, and I heard that one, ding, ding, ding.
Because that's, we're talking about...
He says, in his opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
He's the man who was up there with the wrench. I mean, I think he's kind of allowed to say it. Don't you think under that parameter it's okay? Because that shows he's the person who worked on it. I mean, in his opinion.
It just loses any of... Yeah, I guess that's good. He's excited about it, but it loses the
for you.
objectivity. And
okay.
Yeah.
You had the same thing, that was an exaggeration? And as a reporter, I went, yeah, that's what I start with. So that, yes.
I thought it was great. This isn't a piece aimed at scientists. This is a piece aimed at the
yes.
public. I thought it was a great way to start.
Okay. Yeah.
I wrote it down. I thought it was great.
Yeah, right. Okay. So we have a difference of opinion, but I know this is your natural caution not to exaggerate, and this is our natural urge to get something to open up with that hooks. So there is this chasm, and I understand that. Yes.
He phrased it really well too. It was carefully phrased.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So what Dan is referring to is, like, I think it was a wince moment, and there were a couple of wince moments for me in that piece at the end, for example, when he says, and this has changed our place in the universe. I'm like, no, it hasn't. It's just exactly the same as it always was.
Has mine, but it's changed my opinion of the universe.
Yes, and what I think was really great in the piece was how visually gorgeous it was. It was visually,
Yeah.
it caught my breath. It was visually gorgeous, and I can totally overlook the wince moments before giving me that.
Yeah. Television's a visual medium, people. Remember, if you've got pictures, if you've got ways to show things, this is what we crave. Yes, Valerie.
I also thought the language was so beautiful, and this is more about the reporter than the scientist.
Bill's a good writer.
His painting by numbers phrasing was amazing.
Yeah. And I didn't even know about that. I didn't know, he says they had to put on corrective lenses. I didn't know that it came in black and white and had to be. I mean, that's something I learned from watching this. But more than just that first opening hook soundbite, what about the rest of it? Because he used metaphor. He said it's like the toddler generation of the universe. He was really using language we all related to. Yes.
I thought the report did a really, really good job of being accurate. There was nothing in there that made you cringe. And that's really rare when it comes to television reporting.
Yes, he's very good. Yeah. Yeah. And these guys are great interviews. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, this is the go-to guy for the Hubble. He's had hands-on. He cares about it. He's got personality. He related to it in a way, but he's a scientist. I mean, this was a nice piece, I thought, and it was inspirational. And it makes you miss, like, oh, Hubble, only 10 more years, And the next telescope is in jeopardy now with money. And, they didn't get into that, but if it were a longer piece, they could have. Casey? I'm going to guess, because they had a reverse shot of Bill. By the way, that reverse shot of Bill listening was a cutaway, and I'll get into that a little bit about B-roll and cutaways. My guess is that they pulled up, there was something they took out of the middle of that answer. And in order to pull it up, they had to cover with another picture. They couldn't stay on him. So they cut away to Bill, and then, but the whole interview, and let me just say that right now. This is one of the things I wanted to talk about. A good reporter who knows what they're doing, and if they're on deadline, this was probably, he had time for this, but on deadline they say, I get here in LA working for World News in New York, I would get an assignment at 8 in the morning and I had to have it shot, edited, interviewed, written by 3 p.m. Because 6:30, 3:30, that's our 3 hours less than everybody else in the country, in the East. So that's tight. So a veteran reporter will go in, we know what we need. We know what we need to hear, pretty much if we know the story. So I have often gotten what I need in the first 2 or 3 answers, if somebody's good, I'm interviewing. I'll ask 2 more questions to be polite and get out. A green reporter will spend a half an hour to get one 15-second soundbite and then forget where it was or what it was, and has to go back to the studio and listen to the whole thing and transcribe it. So that's the difference. Somebody, you got an editor in your head, and this is what I want you guys to develop, is the editor in your head hears yourself say something, you go, that was good. They're going to use that one. I was just telling my group, I've been on a book tour this week, and I've learned I've been interviewed a lot, and I see the light in their eyes when I say something they like, and they've all used the same bite, which is, this is about small town newspapers, and I say, as long as there are refrigerator magnets, there will be weekly newspapers. And they'll go, oh, I go, they like that one. You need to be thinking that way. You also need to be thinking about time. I can tell a 15-second soundbite in my head. I know when somebody's asked it or said it in just the right amount of time. For Nightline, we could go 20 seconds or longer, but that's Nightline. For this kind of a piece, which was 2.5 minutes, that's a long time in World News Tonight, or Evening News these days, you usually are around 15 seconds. And that, you can say a lot in 15 seconds. But be aware of how long that is, and we'll get into that in a minute. Yes?
Then the honest thing to say to the scientist is, I need from you a 15-second soundbite. Why don't you try 5 of them, and then I'll go.
No. That's not a conversation, and that's not good. And we'll get into that. You won't get what you want that way, I'll tell you. Yeah.
I wasn't actually sort of offended by the interviewee's hyperbole. For me, it kind of added an emotional aspect and a human aspect to the story that sort of served to anchor it with a specific person. And,
Yeah, he's a character in the piece.
That sort of had that role as opposed to, and I thought that's more effective than just having a scientist rattling off facts.
If I were a young kid thinking about being an astronaut or a scientist or something, that would have sold me. Wow. Yes.
I was going to make the same point. I think this is a really, really interesting how some of the scientists here wasted that. And I think that, so he said, I believe it's the greatest scientific instrument of all time. He took a risk, right? He could have put in some diesel words like one of the greatest or something like that.
He could have said, look, I may be prejudiced, but that would have been better.
I believe he took a risk. I thought it was incredibly humanizing that he did that. And I think it's really interesting, the reaction that we have here. I mean, maybe sometimes scientists, when they're talking to the public, have to take a little more risks and say what they really think, and not put in all these weasel words and overly cautious, right?
I know. I love this.
You're a scientist, but you're also a human. Right?
Yeah, I covered the space shuttle program for CBS News for years. And I'm not a science reporter. I'm a general assignment reporter. So I had to be a kind of a quick study on this stuff. But talking to NASA people, they have their lingo. And, one guy actually said to me, well, I'm happy to report that the EVA was nominal. And I said, why can't you just say the spacewalk went well? Why? EVA, extravehicular activity. Nobody says that, except you guys, But what's good is that actually the fact that I'm not a NASA beat reporter, because they kind of get into the jargon too. They start talking like the guys they're covering. It's really good to have somebody from outside come in and say, what do you mean by that? That's what you need, because I have to then tell that story to the public. So I'm your conduit. Look at me as a friend, not as an idiot, which I might be. Even so, if you can tell me what this story is about to the point where I really can regurgitate it back, which is what a good reporter will do. Now, let me get this right. This is what you're saying, right? And if you say yes, then I can tell that to the public. Okay, so enough of this for a minute. I just want to get into some steps, practical steps for you. First, prepare. When a reporter calls you and asks for an interview, don't wait in trepidation until they show up with their camera and their crew. Prepare. Ask them what they're looking for. Don't ask for specific questions. They're not going to give you specific questions because they don't like to do that, and there's several reasons for that. But one of the reasons is that it doesn't, if you had a chance to see a list of questions, you would write out answers. You would memorize them. It would be a terrible conversation. It would not sound like this, okay? You want to have a conversation with that reporter, okay? Not, next, next, next. There was a joke about a guy at NPR who was such a bad interviewer that he would have his list of questions, and somebody joked that if he were interviewing the head of the Soviet Union during the missile crisis, he would have said, so I see you had this many anti-ballistic missiles, question one. And the guy said, yes, and we're going to fire them from Cuba at you tomorrow. He said, okay, question two, this is not listening, okay? So you want to be in that conversation with eye contact. You don't want to be memorizing questions. But you have a right to know the parameters of that interview so that you can at least have a decent time to think about it, okay? And to do what you did today, which is to distill your message so that you know how to answer it. Okay? You have a right to do that. All right. You might even Google the reporter because everybody's online now. So look up their work. If they're a television reporter or radio reporter, look up what they've done so you've got an idea of who you're dealing with. If you're lucky, you might get a beat reporter in science, but they're very rare these days because of budget cutbacks, Casey can tell you. And certainly in television they are. General assignment reporters are great because they are the great American public. You talk to them, they give the story out. You got to convince them first. Make sure they understand everything you're saying. It's okay to say, am I being clear? Can you understand that? Because I don't want you to be confused. I know some of this is technical, so if I'm being too technical, tell me. That's okay. Make them feel that they can ask those questions. They're a little intimidated by some of you. Trust me on this. So it's okay to put them at their ease. I know you've been learning this from Jean and Howie and Casey, but to distill your message and get rid of the jargon and the acronyms and the academic talk and all of that. I cannot emphasize that enough. The one thing you do not want to do is give an answer that's too long, like a 30-second answer that's wonderful. And then when you see it on the air that night, the best 15 seconds was left on the cutting room floor. Okay, that's why I want you to get that editor in your head, the one that says, I can do this in 15 seconds or less. The best way to do that is to prepare. Write out your distilled message, put it away, practice saying it out loud in different ways, and time yourself. You don't have to do that every time, but do it once or twice before you get into this, because you will really see that you can do it in 15 seconds or less and know how to do it. This is some technical stuff. If you're doing a satellite interview, and this will be rare, a live interview like on the Today Show by satellite, that means that the anchor or the reporter will be someplace else. There will be a camera crew with you, and you will be asked to look directly into the camera. And live interviews by satellite are the most terrifying because there's no redos, no do-overs. So you really want to get relaxed and get your message down before you do that. But you want to look right into that camera lens, and instead of looking at the camera, you want to see the person through it. Imagine the person through that lens and talk right into it. There's nothing, and if they're rich enough, they'll have a nice little IFB earplug in your ear, and you'll hear the questions through your ear. If there's any trouble with that, tap it like that, and they'll see that you're having trouble. If you're getting feedback on that line, which happens, you hear yourself echoed back, horrible, just pull it out. If you've heard the question, pull it out of your ear, answer the question, and put it back in for the next question. It's horrible to hear yourself echoing. This will probably never happen to you. I'm just throwing out what can happen. So that's a live satellite interview you want to. If they're cheap, they won't have the IFB. They will have a speakerphone. A speakerphone that's set up in the room. And I always know, I saw one last night, a speakerphone interview, I can tell. Because the person, first of all, isn't looking at the camera. They're hearing a voice out of a phone and they're going, and they yell. They're saying, yes, my data did show that. You know, and they're talking at the phone and yelling like it's a speakerphone. You don't have to. Microphones work. You can just, remember your microphone always works. You can talk in a natural voice. You don't have to yell. So that's one kind of situation you may never have, but speakerphone interviews are fairly common, so be aware of that one. And while we're on it, microphones. Always assume that everything you say is on the record. If there is a microphone in the room, assume that something you say may end up on YouTube. Or Harry Shearer's website, where he downloads from satellite feeds, which are wonderful. And Harry's a comedian and a friend, and he does very funny things. He has a great 10-minute segment of Dan Rather getting ready to go on live for his show out of Seattle, and he pulled it off the satellite feed before the show took air. And it's 10 minutes of Dan discussing whether he should have his trench coat collar up or down. I'm not kidding. 10 minutes of this discussion. And it's not flattering to Dan, but it's pretty funny. Just assume that if there's a microphone in the room, even if they say we're not on yet, that it's hot. You know, so that'll save you some headaches. So you've prepared. When the camera crew and the producer and the reporter appear, it's your home, your office, wherever, try to keep calm and focused because they're going to be rearranging the furniture. They're going to rearrange your office. They're going to put up lights. It's going to be mayhem. Leave the room. Drink a lot of water. Hydrate, because the first thing that happens when you're nervous is that you get dry mouth. Anybody had that happen? So hydrate, do some deep breathing, and as I tell my television broadcast students before they do a live shot, get physically prepared, okay? Deep breaths in and out. There are a lot of things you can do to, and this is good for your voice too. You want to take deep breaths in and out, roll your head around on your neck to get rid of all of this, and it's always a good thing to do. Yawn. Yawning opens up all of this so that your voice is strong, your voice is coming from here, you're calm, and just get away from those people. And then when they say they're ready, sit down in the chair across from your interviewer. Make sure it's not a swivel chair because you don't want to be doing this. And then make eye contact. I cannot emphasize how important this is. I tell my television students when they're learning interviewing skills, do not take your eyes off that person because it's a conversation. Don't keep looking down at your notes. Look at your notes at the end of the conversation to make sure you haven't forgotten anything. But try to keep it, so a real compliment to me would be if somebody says, gee, that didn't even feel like an interview. I feel like I just had a nice conversation. And you know, you should know as well as them when you're getting your information understood. Because if you're keeping eye contact, you can see you can see when somebody gets it, okay? But if they're looking confused, you'll see that too. So say, stop. Feel free to, especially if it's a taped interview and you know it's going to be edited, make sure you know that. It's not live. If this is going to be, and ask that, is this going to be edited later? And how much of this will you use? Ask that. And if they say, oh, it'll probably be about 15 seconds or at the most 2 15-second bites, that helps you. If you don't like the way you answered something, say, scratch that. Don't use that. Let me start that again. It's edited. You can say that, and it's good for you to feel free that you've got control of it. Okay. Let's see. I want to make sure I got all of that. Listening, body language. Okay, I always ask my main question, the one I know the answers are probably going to be elicited by that question, at the beginning and the end of the interview. I ask it again, and I usually preface it by saying, look, I know I asked this once, but television's all about brevity and, almost apologize for that. And I say, so I'm going to ask it again, so I have a couple of versions. Anybody with half a brain will understand that you're asking for something more succinct. But not every reporter is going to give you that favor. So you should feel free to say, you asked me something earlier. If you didn't like the way you answered it, could we take that again? Because I'd just like to talk about that a little bit more. What I'm really trying to tell you here is to take control a little bit. Really, you're the person who's important here. You're the one with the information. You're the one who should control how that message goes out. So, to a certain extent. So you really, really have the right to say, let me answer that again. I wasn't so sure that was clear. Feel free to do that at any time. Okay. The other thing I ask them to do at the end of an interview is to end the interview with this phrase. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you would like to add now? That is a really good thing to ask people, because very often people are shy and they think that you've asked everything you need to know. I don't know what I need to know sometimes because I don't know your field. So this is your chance to add whatever you feel was left out. Not every reporter is going to ask you that question. So be prepared to offer that up, okay? Say, there's one thing you didn't ask me about, and I think it was funny. We were in our groups earlier, and our little group was distilling its message, and Wei, is Wei in here? Yeah, there she is, way back there. Wei was doing her talk about her or telling us what she does, and at the very end of her session, she says, and there's this thing about alcohol that we're studying. We're doing this research into showing how you can take, is it an enzyme way? Okay. That would allow you to drink, take this, and then the effects of the alcohol would be erased so you could drive. I'm going, really? And I'm making appointments. I'm getting, let's get a crew over there. That is an amazing story. And she had kind of buried it at the end. This is the kind of thing, like if you're thinking, I wonder if I should mention that thing about where all evidence of alcoholism is erased when you get into your car, would be interesting to them. You would want to add that right at that point. Okay. And I will be following up. Okay, so just remember to keep practicing everything you've learned so far up to keep your sentences short, avoid jargon, use simple numbers or percentages because broadcast can't handle a lot of numbers. You're writing for the ear. You're talking for the ear. And even though we have TiVo, nobody's going to rewind that to say, now did he say 90% or 80%? And how many percents were there in that sentence? Keep it simple, the numbers. Can't take in too many. Here's another trick. If the reporter asks an idiotic question, and they will, don't treat them like an idiot. Just smile and say, that's an interesting question. But let me say this first. And interesting is a great word because it's not a lie. And it's like, that's an interesting question. I learned this from Sam Donaldson at ABC News. Peter Jennings, had he did this thing that annoyed a lot of us. I was at the Democratic Convention, floor reporter, and he would say, you do your live thing, you do your little live report, and I'm going to come and I will ask you a follow-up question. And he'd say, what do you want me to ask you? And I would come up with a good question, which I assumed he would be asking me. He never asked that question. He would ask something completely out of the ballpark that you hadn't thought about at all, just completely throw you a curve. We don't know why he did this. He did it to everybody. Sam Donaldson told me, he says, I know how to handle Peter. When he does that to you, say, that's an interesting question, Peter. But first let me say this, and you go ahead with the answer that you already prepared. And then you do it so long that he has no time to do the next question. You can do that too. If somebody asks you a ridiculous question, just say, that's an interesting question. But first let me just say this, and maybe they'll forget that they asked the other one and never come back to it. But do not be afraid to say, that's sensationalizing the facts. That's really overstating the case. You really can't say that. If your work hasn't been subjected to peer review, for example, and I just insisted that we were doing a story about light and air pollution, how they work together. This new scientist out of NOAA had this study that was getting a lot of attention around the world, not here in LA, of course, where we have such bad pollution, but we did a great story about that for KCET, public television over here. And he said, you should know that even though I've presented this paper and it's gotten a lot of attention, it hasn't been subjected to peer review. And I said, I will write that into the script. And the producer wanted to take it out for time. You know, we were crunching on time and seconds are precious. And I said, you may not take it out. So you hope that you have a reporter who hears that and says, but you need to emphasize it. If you say, this isn't final, these findings are preliminary, we shouldn't read too much into this. I don't want to downplay our research because we're excited about it. But, you know, you have to put it in context. Make sure they do that, okay? Give them a way to do that. Okay, so much for content. Let's now talk quickly about appearance and vocal delivery, the thing that, you know, most people, the appearance thing, everybody hates about television. When I joined ABC News, I came from 10 years in radio at CBS. And I never had to worry about how I looked. And the whole idea that I'd have to worry about how I looked just horrified me. So they sent a consultant to work with me. She sat with me. She looked at a couple of my pieces and she said, well, I just have one thing to say. She's being paid a lot of money for this one thing. I couldn't believe it. I thought, wow. Anyway, and like, you know, that character in The Graduate who whispers plastics, you know, she leans over and she says, just one word, scarves. And I said, scarves? She goes, yes, it would help soften that angular look you have. You know, now, first of all, this is a lot of information for me. I don't know I have an angular look. Now I'm worried about the angular look. And I don't know how to tie scarves. So, and I'm a field reporter, so I'm like out in hurricanes and things, you know. I'm thinking scarves, you know. So it was an interesting moment. But I have learned a few things about appearance, and I will pass that on. Do not, men, wear ties that say, I'm a crazy person. Okay. Like a big tie with Disney characters on it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're going to be looking at Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse and Pluto and thinking, what? This is a serious... Okay, just don't wear anything that will distract from your message. That's the point. Women, that would mean, like as I tell my female students, the 4 C's. Credibility and cleavage are not compatible concepts. Okay, you just don't want to be wearing anything that detracts from your words, okay? Nice blue suits are nice on television. Don't wear all white, too hard for the camera. Don't wear all black, you'll disappear. So just think, you know, what will look professional and not detract from the message. That's the key thing. You're communicating here and you don't want to detract from it. Now, B-roll. This is a term we use for shooting video that will cover other things. Now, you saw the reverse shot of Bill Whitaker listening to the scientist. And you saw some other, I don't know if we saw any other B-roll in this. But if they say, we're going to have to shoot a little B-roll of you after the interview, they may have you typing at your computer. They may have you walking down the hall. And this is to cover the track that introduces you, usually. So it'd be like, Dr. Strangelove is head of the How I Stopped Worrying and Lived to Love the Bomb Institute, you know. And we see Dr. Strangelove, you know, making a bomb in his lab or whatever he's doing. Okay, that's what that's for. It's just to cover it up. So even though television's usually about only looking good from the waist up, there will be B-roll. So you may be asked to walk down a hallway, and stilettos might be tough. So guys, leave it. I'm kidding. Stilettos, you know, anything that's going to be uncomfortable. Men, there may be a wide shot of you talking to this guy in the chair. Don't wear socks that show your white legs. If it pulls up, you know, and you got your legs crossed, you know, that night you'll be going, oh my gosh, you know, why did I do that? Okay, so just think ahead. These are, it's almost embarrassing to even be talking about this, but, you know, I will save you in the end. Okay. Okay, now that I've given you 50 things to remember, I'm going to ask you just to relax and be yourself, even though there's a lot to think about. If you're prepared ahead of time for a radio or television interview, you're going to be fine because you know your stuff. And we're there to find out what you know. It's It should be flattering to you. It should be something exciting for you, and I hope you do learn to relax with it, because it really can be a fun conversation, educating one person to reach millions, okay? If you're doing a radio interview, and I just did one last night with China's Radio Today show, it was really interesting. Television, of course, you have to be looking at the person. Do not look into the camera, boy. Always look at the person who's interviewing you, unless it's a satellite feed. But for radio, what's wonderful is that you can, walk around your house naked. I don't care. But you're on the phone. I would suggest you get up and move, because you sound so much more animated. When you're vocalizing, you want to be standing up. You want to be sitting up straight. So all of the organs and all the anatomy that go into creating good voice are in alignment. And I really find that when you're moving, you're more animated and energetic. Today in our group, I had the group on the second go-around get up, stand up at the end of the room and talk to us. It was amazing how much more energy we got, much more animation, much more passion about their work. They started to gesture. The whole body got into it. And that will help your message. Vocal delivery, for those of you for whom English is a second language, and I know there are several people in here who fall into that category, the best advice I have is slow down. Slow down, enunciate, articulate. You don't want to be chironed, as we say, with your words typed under your face like you're speaking a foreign language, but you're not. I covered the presidential campaign of Paul Tsongas. Some of you may remember him. He was actually a front runner with Bill Clinton, the late Paul Tsongas. But he had an unfortunate speech impediment, and he sounded a little bit like Elmer Fudd. Do you remember that, man? And if you didn't have the camera close on him so you could see his mouth moving, it was sometimes hard to understand him. And at one point, we were too far away on the podium, and I was writing the piece and used a soundbite, and they said, we may have to chiron him. I said, you can't chiron a presidential candidate speaking in English. You can't do that. But so you want to be able to be understood. Slow down, articulate, enunciate, and if you've done your preparation and you've gotten your message distilled, you'll know exactly what you have to get across. But it really is important for everybody. You don't want to have huge, huge pauses that you can drive a truck through. They can pull it up to a certain extent, but there's only so much B-roll cutaway they can do. So try to talk in fairly succinct segments. There's something scientists do when I've interviewed them. I was talking about that with somebody out here. I think it's part of your culture and the way you talk. Everybody uses filler words. Some people will say now, now, now. Teenagers will say like, which drives you crazy. Scientists say so. I have heard this. So you have your thing, and so you didn't notice that? They all do this. It's so strange. Don't. Don't do it more than once or twice in an interview. It drives me crazy. So it's really an interesting kind of thing. Be aware of any kind of vocal tics that you have. If you sound like Minnie Mouse, if you can be the smartest person in the world, the greatest discovery, but if your voice is like this, or you're mumbling like this, or you're slurring your words, it doesn't matter, because nobody will hear your message. So the voice is very important. Slow down, breathe. If the interview is being taped, which most of them are, for editing later, you can stop and think. Pause. Don't feel pressured to answer. Take a moment. Let me think about that. Okay, and then go. And if you don't like it, say, wait a minute, erase that. Just forget that. Let's start over. And start over, okay? Keep control of your message. That's the key thing. You're the one with the information. You're the one who's got to tell the story. So help the reporter out, Don't allow yourself to be rushed, even if they feel like they're rushed. Make sure they've got it before they leave the room, okay? I love interviewing scientists. I was just going to say one thing I told Bill Whitaker, that I was doing this using his piece. Last night I emailed him, and he emailed me back, and he said, "What a nice note. I love talking to astrophysicists. They're grounded in hard facts and numbers, yet think deep, wild thoughts about the meaning and origins of life. They're always fascinating." And that's from one of the best national reporters in the country. That's a real compliment. I mean, and you all want to aspire to be that person that we all come to, because, you know, your passion for what you do, I mean, I've heard it from all of you talking to you, is so clear. Don't be afraid of that. Don't think it's somehow not scientific or not professional. I know among your peers you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to take, you know, singular pride, and it's a group effort and all that. Let the passion flow. Let us feel it. We all want to know about your exciting work. So share it and feel it and let us know about it. And be that person. Always fascinating. Okay, thank you.